Alright, I'm not good at tutorials. I don't try to do tutorials, but since we're here, let's try and give it a go. First thing, PB blasted. These 4 bolts. Alright, next you want to make sure you at least can break each one loose, because if not, there's no point. Next thing you're going to want to do is drain your oil and plan for an oil change, basically, because you're going to be taking off the lines that feed to the turbo to feed it oil for lubrication. Remove the air intake pipe, and we disconnect the down pipe. Right now I'm undoing the Banjo bolts, which you can't see, and I'm just letting the coolant drain out into a bucket down there. These Banjo bolts are hard to get to, some of them, or mostly on the turbo. Before I get too carried away and start cursing vividly at this thing, can't get it out through the bottom because the wastegate is in the way. This guy right here is in the way of this, which is the air compressor line thing. I'm just gonna have to remove the top exhaust manifold. Fortunately, only one stud broke. Not my fault though, it was already broken. It was back there behind the power steering. It was already broken. And it came out. There's no way to maneuver this exhaust manifold out of there from the power steering because that long ass freaking. So now power steering has to come off. But for me to get, power steering space and taking loosening the belt, I am now taking out the airbox and god damn it. Alright, power steering is loose, so now you can see I will have room to take this bad boy off. Alright, so I'm kind of livid at the moment, so even moving this ass to clear this won't pull out far enough because it's still hooked to the turbo, which can't go anywhere because of the AC compressor. Now if I could unbolt this, I'd be golden. I was able to jimmy this thing out. Them 2 damn bolts. Let's see if I can get this thing out now. Success! Alright, let's get this damn turbo out. Ugh! I hope the hard part's over. So I salvaged what I needed from my turbo because some of the lines don't match, and I had to use bigger washers for one line. So I got this in there now. Here was the washers I had to pick up, and now I'm just waiting for a new gasket to arrive. Oh my god. Okay. What's in there? It was very hard for me. Like I said, I'm not a tutorial type of person. I couldn't get the exhaust manifold back on separate from the turbo, and I could barely get the turbo and the exhaust manifold bolted together and get that piece in, and I had to get that wadded in there, but not bolted up, but in there, and then, this is a nightmare. It was like a puzzle. You could only get it all in and out one way, at least for me, but it's all in. I didn't come fully prepared. I didn't get this replacement thing for Cobra pipe. I'll figure this out in a second. Right now, all I'm concerned about is having to use one of my old lines from the T25 turbo onto the TD04 turbo. It's on fire! wasn't attempting to do a tutorial. Yeah, because I didn't know what I was getting into. You know, just kind of going at it. Wanted to bring the car in and kind of go through what I went through, show you the details. So if you're planning to swap a T25 turbo out for a TD04, some things you should look out for. So let's get right into it. Alright, here we go. So you got the B204 engine that came with the T25 turbo stock swapped to the TD04 setup, which is in the B205 models and the Aero 95s. I think the ARC 95s as well. Let's start with the intake system. I always see some aftermarket thing that has to be done, or at least people that need to be done, because of the King Cobra pipe being different entirely of the original T25 setup. So just showing what I did here. So you got the King Cobra pipe, you have the stock airbox that came with this engine, and this piece right here, you can see the part number 4876124. This is for the 2000 to 2002 Saab 93s with the B205 engine. This airbox plastic piece, like part of this, I think goes out to like right here. You can stretch this pretty far. So I had to push this guy, like the piece on this that comes out really far, there's like a little tab on it or whatever to stop the sleeve from going any further. Well, I just entirely ignored that. Next was this thing. I don't know if there's a replacement line for it, but all I did is I took this plastic hose that is designed, this piece right here is designed to be one piece all the way to the back, and then it goes like somewhere else, somewhere in the back under here. I can't remember where it routes to on the B205 or the 95 cars. On the B204, it goes right back into here on the valve cover. Cut this line somewhere like right here, I think, and then I just got a hose and routed it to there. Next, for this thing, I had to get really creative. This is your bypass valve. With it open up like this, it's like every time I get off the throttle, the air gets released and it makes the noise. But you're supposed to have this go back into the intake just so it reroutes and it doesn't make noise, and it's just, I guess, probably more efficient, but I like the noise. So there's a rubber grommet in there that fits in there nicely. I found it at AutoZone. I can't remember what it was for, or the part number, I'm sorry, but it fit in there perfectly. And then that adapted for this to fit in there perfectly. Now, I had the top grinded down. This was like a full-on like head bolt nut. This is for, I think, a drain plug. But I didn't like how it looked with a big hex head on top of it. So I went to our machine shop that does our wheel spacers for us and asked them just to grind it flat. And now, that's that. Alright, next what I want to go over is the Banjo bolts and the lines underneath this guy. So I'm going to try and put it at an angle like right here. So you have 1, 2, 3. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Now, typically these are 12mm heads, but if you get a newer turbo off of like a 9.5, this is off of 2007, they came with 17mm heads. So you can see this is significantly bigger than this middle one. I changed out that middle one to an older one, to a 12mm, because a 17mm in there, you have no room to tighten it or loosen it. The only way I was able to get mine out is because it wasn't all the way tightened, and I had like a broken wrench and the radiator fan undone, and it was all cockeyed and angled. And anyway, so just future reference, if you end up getting a TD04 turbo and they give you the new Banjo bolts, make sure it's not the 17mm ones. You're going to want the 12mm ones, I promise. They're a lot easier to work with. Also, another thing I wanted to touch base on is that I had to use this original hardline for this turbo. Now there's a slight problem with that. I'm going to see if I can kind of illustrate it here. So look at that washer, how it fits nicely with the roundness of the Banjo line. That's the correct washer that should be in there to fit correctly. But this one, you can see the washer seems to be a lot further out, a lot spreading a lot more. That's because it's a bigger washer I had to put in there to fill the space for using the original Banjo line. Because the original Banjo line, the space in it is bigger than this one. You put this Banjo bolt in, it fills perfectly. Put the Banjo bolt in this one, there's still space for coolant to escape. So I had to use bigger washers to fill that gap. So keep that in mind if you use an original line. Another quick thing I wanted to show with this new hard line for this turbo, it bolts up and everything to the appropriate spots. But if you look here, like right here, there's where it bolts up, right? But right up there above it, it's hard to see with the lighting, I can't. But basically what I have there is a cap. There's a black cap, and then I have 2 zip ties on it because there's an outlet here where coolant also flows through. So I don't like how this was done, but I didn't know what else to do for it. This line originally goes into the throttle body for the 9.5s, but on my car you don't need it. So for now, this is the solution. Okay, going underneath the car, you can see up here is the other turbo line. I believe that's the oil line. And then over, it's kind of hard to see, here comes the other one that goes up above the crank sensor up there. Another thing is this turbo bracket. Make sure you get the new one for the TD04, as your original T25 one will not bolt up to the new turbo. Now this I did not know. I'm going to see if I can get a clip from earlier in the video of this new oil return line for the bottom of the turbo that goes back into the block. The new one is like a all aluminum piece. This basically is the old setup off the T25. But this piece right here with the bolt, there's another bolt on the other side, so it's like an oval. This piece has to stay with the new turbo. They need to go together. You can't swap them. They don't work. So, but I didn't like that aluminum piece, so what I did is I cut it off like right about here, and I used this piece and this pipe or hose on the top remaining piece for this turbo. I did that because the aluminum one was so frustrating to try and get put on there, and what ended up happening is I was cockeying it so bad into the block it ripped the seal, and so oil was kind of like spitting out, misting out, and so I had to like basically cut it off and like get creative with unbolting this to get that whole aluminum piece back out. So I thought this was a better solution. This is just easier to put in, and the hose is easier to replace, and yeah, so that's what I ended up doing for that. So just keep that in mind. If you swap to the bigger turbo, the TD04, you're gonna need this piece that goes with the turbo. However you want to make it go down in there is up to you, but the top piece that bolts up to it, you're gonna need that and the bolts. Like honestly, the swap isn't bad. The biggest thing is the balance of trying to get everything out. Now, there might be a trick, I don't know. I thought I could just drop the turbo straight out and leave the exhaust manifold on. I couldn't, and it wasn't easy to unbolt the exhaust manifold and from the turbo, so whatever you gotta do to try and wiggle it out. But that was the biggest thing, is the puzzle, just trying to get it all through. The other big thing is to make sure you get all the right hard lines for the turbo swap. Close this puppy up and take it out on the road and see how it compares. Overall comparison from the T25 turbo to the TD04 turbo is, I mean, unless you have a manual boost controller or a tune, like a serious tune, the end power is not going to be much different. The biggest reason to go to the TD04 is the ability to make more power beyond what the T25 can do. I think I saw somewhere that someone made 280 or 290 horsepower on the T25 turbo. and that's definitely with the turbo maxed out. I've ran my car here with the T25 maxed out, but the TD04 definitely has a lot more room to go in terms of horsepower. So I'd say that's the #1 reason to upgrade to this turbo, because you just have more turbo. But the other reason is the way it builds boost. I've noticed with the T25 at around 2000 RPM, boost kicks in, and it kicks in hard. But with my tune, it eventually dies off around, I want to say 4500, maybe 5000 RPM, and the red line is at 6. So you get a really good kick between 2 and 4, but after that it's just kind of like it kind of falls on its face. But with the TD04 turbo, the boost kicks in at about 3000 RPM, but it doesn't stop. It doesn't run out of breath. It keeps going all the way to red line. It pulls hard. It feels like that's how it should have been. I hear that a lot, and you know what? They're right. This is how it should have came from the factory. This is how a turbo should boost. I didn't do the turbo swap to get more power, but because I started blowing oil out of the exhaust. I checked the piping to the intercooler and the piping to the throttle body, and sure enough there was oil in it. So odds are it's the turbo. So if you look at the price of a used T25 versus the price of a used TD04, I mean, you might as well upgrade. With that said, if you're keeping your car stock, or you're going stage 1 or maybe even stage 2, you're fine. Don't bother swapping to a TD04. The T25 can handle that just fine. If you're going for stage 3, it's questionable. You're pretty much topping out the T25. If you're looking for any more power than that, you absolutely need to upgrade. But my point is, there is work involved in getting the other turbo to fit. That's why I say, if you're not going higher than stage 3 or even at stage 3, then just replace it with a T25. I hope this was helpful for some of you out there who are in the middle of this swap or just curious about doing this swap. If you've done this swap and you've noticed that I've missed some things, please comment on it. This could help out a lot of other people. Until next time.